Hello, everybody. So we're moving along with basic logic, and this week we're going to be talking about what qualities we look for in arguments in logic to determine if an argument is valid or invalid, sound or unsound, strong or weak. And those qualities apply differently depending on the type of argument, as you'll see. Now, speaking of types of arguments, so Kahoot, I put up a Kahoot. You can reach it by this URL. Here's the PIN number. If you have the app, I think all you have to do is enter the PIN number. And it will give you a chance to see how you're doing with identifying inductive and deductive arguments. And like I mentioned before, I think the thing with logic is that the more you practice it, the better you'll be at it. So this is just a chance for you to do that. No timer, no anything, but you can take the time you need. Think through them. Think about what makes one deductive and rather than inductive, and then inductive rather than deductive. So you get a hang of doing that, because you're going to need that foundation to handle what we're talking about this week, which is validity, truth, soundness, strength, and cogency. You'll see where all that fits in just a minute. Oops, sorry about that. Finger happy. So validity and truth apply to deductive arguments. As we talked about before, in a deductive argument, a valid deductive argument, the conclusion must be true if the premises are true, or premises if there's just one. So you've got a valid deductive argument is a deductive argument that behaves just like it's supposed to. It's absolutely true, the conclusion, because the premises are false. An invalid deductive argument is one in which the conclusion is not true, even though the premises are. And you'll see how that happens in just a moment. Sounds a little counterintuitive when you first come across it, but it's not. So soundness, when we say an argument, a deductive argument is sound rather than unsound, we mean that it's valid, plus all the premises are true. So all flowers are plants, all daisies are flowers, therefore all daisies are plants. Now think of this as all A are B, all C are A, therefore all C are B, right? They have to be. And one thing I always look for is you can break these arguments down into antecedents and precedents and all sorts of things. But basically what I look for is, are these lined up at a diagonal? Because what you will see over here is they're not. And that makes this argument invalid, because the argument here is all A's are B's, all C's are B's, therefore all A's are C, which is not the case. It has to be invalid because the reference it's making is broken. And if you break it down into letters, you see that better. So if you just do this purely with letters, make dogs A, make cats C, make mammals B, all A's are B, all C's are B, therefore all A's are C's, you can see right here that doesn't work, right? This lineup doesn't work. And an unsound argument, deductive argument, is an argument that has a false premise in it, right? Therefore, the conclusion is not going to be true. All birds can fly is a false premise, because all birds can't fly. Penguins are birds, therefore penguins can fly. Penguins can't fly, at least not very far, and not in the same sense that other birds fly. So, and penguins aren't the only birds that don't fly. Is it an emu? I think it's an emu that doesn't fly. I'm not sure. But you get the idea. Valid, the letters are going to line up, right? All A are B, all C are A, therefore all C are B. They have to be, because this is that and that is this, then this has to be that. It has to be so. It's common sense. Sometimes, though, it's easier to see when you break it down into letters. So let's take a look at these valid and invalid deductive arguments. So you read through these and ask yourself, how are these put together, right? Do some work by breaking out the premises and giving them letters, and then see how the conclusion comes out. If the government passes new law mandating renewable energy, carbon emissions will decrease. The government has passed a law mandating renewable energy, therefore carbon emissions will increase. This is a valid argument. Whereas this one, you read this one, and if you read it too fast and you don't think about it, you might think it's valid, but it's not. Users will migrate to alternatives if a popular social media platform shuts down. Users are migrating to alternatives, therefore a popular. See, the reference here is let's do this. P if Q, Q therefore P. You see what I'm saying? So P, this migration will migrate to alternatives if the social media platform shuts down. P then Q, right? Users are migrating, P, therefore Q. It doesn't work. It's referring to itself. It's referring to the antecedent. So if you did this on paper, you would see that it doesn't make sense. But you can kind of read it and ask yourself, well, are users, just because aren't there other reasons they can migrate? Sure. There are other reasons they can migrate. Just because they're migrating does not necessarily mean that the platform will shut down. Whereas up here, this is linearly correct, right? If this, then this, therefore that, right? So it properly refers to the parts of the argument. If the national park is closed, then tourism revenue will decrease. National park is not closed, therefore tourism revenue will not decrease. This is invalid because tourism revenue could decrease for a lot of reasons. It's just not the case that this follows logically. Same thing here. If inflation is under control, then interest rates remain stable. If P, then Q. Q, therefore P. It's referring to itself. There's no conclusion here. It's a circular argument. It begs the question. Inflation could be under control. Inflation is not a single thing, right? It's not controlled by a single thing. So a lot of things can happen that would cause inflation to pop up. And usually if there's inflation, in fact, interest rates are not stable because the Fed will be trying to do things to cause the inflation to tamp down, and by doing so, they typically raise interest rates. Okay, so in inductive arguments, rather than talking about validity and invalidity, we talk about cogent and non-cogent arguments, right? We talk about strong versus weak. Remember, inductive arguments are arguments that are probabilities, whereas deductive arguments are supposed to be statements of fact. Inductive arguments, which are most of the time the arguments we have, right? We don't debate too much about facts, but I shouldn't say that. Some people do, but not logically. That is more used within science and math, deductive arguments, within philosophy and social science and humanities. You find a lot more inductive argument going on. So inductive is a probability. In a strong inductive argument are arguments in which it is improbable that the conclusion is false. We're going to try a few of these in a minute. You'll see. A weak inductive argument is an argument in which the conclusion does not follow as a probability. It's not necessarily likely that what you're arguing will be true. So here's a cogent, strong argument. A cogent argument, inductive argument, is a strong argument where all premises are true. All right. So every U.S. president was older than 40. True. Therefore, probability of the next president will be older than 40. That is a strong argument in which the premises are true. Now, it's still a probability in the conclusion, but it's a strong cogent argument because the premises are true. So the stronger the premises, the stronger the argument. A false premise cannot support a true conclusion. So if you made this, I don't know, let's not mess with it, but if the premise is false, the conclusion cannot be true. All right, here's some examples of that. So a politician gave a speech on economic reform. The next day, the stock market rose. This happens all the time, right? Presidents want to take They want to take credit when the stock market goes up, and then they want to blame somebody when the stock market goes down. Not any particular president, please, but presidents, all of them. So this politician gives a speech on economic reform. The stock market shoots up, and the politician's the argument here, the conclusion is, the politician's speech caused the stock market to rise. No, that's a weak argument, because they are not necessarily correlated with each other. So this is a weak inductive argument. It is not necessarily true, not even probably true, but that the politician's speech caused the stock market to rise. Could have been any number of other things. Here's one in a national poll, 10,000 voters from diverse demographics, 70 stated they support stricter gun laws. Therefore, it's likely that a majority of voters in our country support stricter gun laws. This is a very strong inductive argument. Over the past because it follows, see 70 here? When you start seeing percentages in here, this is what you want to center in on. 10,000 voters, 70%. That's a good sample. That's a good majority. The conclusion is likely to be true. Over the past 2 years, regions implementing universal pre-K programs have seen increases in literacy rates among children. Therefore, implementing universal pre-K programs nationwide would likely increase literacy rates among children. So we have a standard of education in our country, and if we test a program within those set of standards and it works, and all other things are equal, that is, the children are properly diversified, and in that, what I mean, there's the sexes are balanced, the various ethnic groups are balanced, then we can discern from that we might apply this same program broadly, because the program itself, the educational program itself, is supposed to be more or less the same over our society. Now, it's not exactly the same, but my point is, this is a strong inductive argument, whereas this one is not. In a single town, a new tax policy led to economic growth. Therefore, a new tax policy will lead to economic growth nationwide. Well, a nation and a city or a town are way different things. One is relatively simple compared to the other. So this does not follow, right? This is a true premise, but the assumption made here is improbable. It's just simply improbable that because you do something in a town, it'll work at the national level. It's the same as the one above this, but in this one, you're dealing with a closed system that follows a certain set of criteria that is the same across the country. This is not the case in this one. All right. So how do you prove invalidity? Well, there are a lot of ways, but like I said before, the best way to do it, you should take your arguments and try to diagram them in this way. So A or B, C or A, C or B. See, right here, there's a diagonal between the two. The relationship between the precedent and the antecedent are the same precedent and antecedent. Therefore, the antecedent relates to the C. Here, the antecedent relates to the precedent because these two are lined up. So spell them out, right? Because it should look like this if it's going to be a valid deductive argument. So here's one, and here's this kind of done in reverse, right? A or B, C or A, C or B. Then in this example, we tried it with words, right? So you could start here and see how your argument drapes over this, or make an argument based on these letters rather than working backwards. Whatever helps you learn. All sporting events are engaging pastimes. All A sporting events are B, engaging pastime. All baseball games, now we have a third thing, a C, are sporting events. All right, so all sporting events are engaging pastimes. Baseball games are sporting events. Therefore, all baseball games are engaging pastimes. I happen to like baseball. There are plenty of people who don't. I think baseball is an engaging pastime. And apparently, from the looks of things, a good percentage of people population-wise believe that. This argument is a substitution instance for an argument form. So here's the argument form. The argument form is what we put together with these letters, and it has the feel of algebra, right? So we put them together with letters, and then we substitute the letters with actual words to make sure that we get out of it a legitimate, valid argument. Now, every time you do, if you do this part right, any argument you come up with over here should be correct. This is an incomplete argument, right? So consider this example. Geese are migratory waterfowl, so they fly south in the winter. It's missing a premise, right? That geese are migratory waterfowl it's like all A are C, but how do you get, let's see, let me get this right. All A or C, all of a sudden you have a conclusion, right? So you got all A or C, but there's something missing right here. We're missing a premise, because it doesn't mean that migratory waterfowl do not necessarily fly south, right? So we need a premise. This is good for thinking about how you construct an argument, and this is not an argument you're going to have a debate over, right? But it'll help you think when you're making an argument, what am I missing in my premise? Those of you who think you might want to be in law school one day, you want to be in business, you want to be in healthcare, when you're making an argument for something, you're going to want to make sure you have a complete argument. And this one's missing a part, right? All migratory waterfowl are birds that fly south in the winter. All geese are migratory waterfowl. All right. So migratory waterfowl, all geese are migratory waterfowl. So this is the second premise after we establish that migratory waterfowl fly south, right? We know that they migrate, but how do they migrate? Do they walk? Do they do jumping jacks? Do they go north? Do they go west? Do they go? So basically this argument becomes a complete argument because we define what it is that makes migratory waterfowl unique, which happens to be what we're going to assert in the conclusion. It's pretty much common sense. If you read this, you might say that doesn't feel right. I mean, how do I know they fly south in the winter? You might not immediately go, well, it's missing a premise, but that's the feeling you have. So when you use your own common sense when you're looking at these things. All right, here's a counterexample method. These are all ways to test the validity of an argument. In this case, a deductive argument. An argument is valid if every time the premises are true, the conclusions must also be true. A counterexample looks for a way to have true premises but a false conclusion. So basically, you're going to look at an argument and say, is there any way that argument could be false, right? Can I falsify that argument? Because if you can, that's an invalid argument. And there's some examples here in the, we'll get to, all right? So here's, let's see, we covered that one, right? Also check the form. Like I said before, isolate the form, all A or B, all C or B, all A or C. This is invalid. This is the old, all cats are dogs argument, because all dogs are mammals, all cats are mammals, therefore all dogs are cats. Well, in this case, the antecedent is determining the precedent, and that's not how it works, right? So you could map this out against your argument, whatever. Let's just, we got the cats or dogs argument over here, and we would see that this is wrong, right? This is not. It is not true that just because they're mammals that they're the same. Mammal is a broader classification than the animal itself. So again, common sense, but it's amazing how often people do not think through this. And if you're going to be in the careers you're in, I know you want to, I'm not going to put you, don't get on the treadmill and, try to burn yourself out by being the perfect. But you want to be competent, right? You definitely want to be competent. And this kind of thinking makes you competent. And one slip up in this kind of thinking, particularly if you're in a critical role, is going to cause people to second guess you on down the line. So you have to think through these things. I know this seems sort of esoteric, but it really isn't. So here's a counterexample method, right? So construct a substitute instance with a true premise and a false conclusion. So all A or B, all C or B, right? All right. And then write down the premises and the conclusion. Ask yourself, is it possible for the premises to be true, but the conclusion to be false? If you can imagine a situation, then that is invalid. If you can't imagine a situation, the argument may be valid, right? It still could have some errors in it, but for the most part, this is a good test. So here's the examples I was looking for earlier. This is true, but this is false, right? So if I can think of a way to falsify this just by looking at nature, all cats are not dogs, right? Also, I know it's invalid because the category is larger than the animals, and there are other animals in this category. Mammal does not make these animals the same, except that they're both mammals, not that they're the same. So this is an argument that they're both mammals that tries to then make the argument that dogs and cats are the same. All A or B, all C or B, therefore all A or C. That's not right, right? Oops, sorry. Well, so here's another one. All humans are mortal. All women are mortal. Certainly both of them are true. All humans are women. Certainly not true, right? So again, you can falsify this because you know it's not true. We have males. We have men, right? So that is invalid. Again, common sense, but when we get into more abstracted arguments, this can be very useful. All right. So past 5 years, wildfires in Australia have increased in both frequency, severity. So are these, first off, are these deductive or inductive? We'll do a little brush up on this. Therefore, it's likely that wildfires in Australia will continue to increase. Now, what makes that an inductive argument? Remember, I told you that there are little hack words that if you see these words, it's a hack to tell you that it's inductive. Deductive arguments do not use words like likely. They're making factual statements. So this, all you have to determine about this is if it is a strong argument. And the person is saying it's likely. So it probably is a strong argument. Canada's universal health system improved access to medical care and reduced overall costs. Therefore, implementing a universal healthcare system in the United States would likely achieve similar results. This is a deductive because the argument is if this worked in Canada, it would work in the United States. Now, this may not be a sound argument because it may not be that it would work in the United States. But as a deductive argument, I mean, you can argue with this, is what I'm trying to say. As a deductive argument, it's valid. In interviews with 20 scientists, 18 stated Therefore, most scientists believe in artificial intelligence poses significant ethical challenges. Well, so what do we see here? Most, right? Most. Doesn't say all. It is a hack word. So pay attention. This is an inductive argument. It's a strong inductive argument, but it's an argument. All countries in the EU follow EU trade laws. France is a country in the EU. Therefore, France follows US trade laws. Or EU trade laws. So absolutely a deductive argument and a sound deductive argument. So you get the idea. A little brush up there. All right, so I'll go down here. Inductive or deductive, weak or strong. I met two people from New York, and they were both rude. Therefore, people from New York are rude. Well, this is a deductive argument that is I should have up here sound, weak or strong, sound or not. So this is an unsound argument because you just have a sample of two people. So you can't make this. This does not prove that. Right? People from New York are rude because I met two people from New York and they were rude. That's not going to work. The overwhelming majority of climate scientists agree that human activity are significantly warming, this it's reasonable to infer. There's your hack words, your hedges. This is an inductive argument. It's a strong inductive argument. Every time I wear my lucky socks, my favorite team wins. Therefore, wearing my lucky socks causes my team to win. This is a unsound argument. This is a causal effect that doesn't exist. All right. Historical data shows that economic recession follow a decline in leading economic indicators. Given the recent drop in these indicators, it is what? Likely, inductive, and strong. Either you support the new policy or you don't care about improving the environment. This is a fallacy. It's called a false dilemma. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. And therefore, it is a deductive argument. It's trying to make a statement of fact. It's a deductive argument that's invalid. In a survey of 1,000 adults, 85%. Okay, here's your indicator. 85% prefer shopping online. Therefore, it's likely, another indicator. And so this is inductive, and it is a strong inductive argument. So out on the web, out on the internet, there are some Kahoots you can try that will help you practice validity or soundness of an argument. So you go out there and take a look at it. You've got to know if you're looking at an inductive argument, and then you have to judge the quality of that argument. These are easier, so I'd start here. These are a little harder because you have to reveal a little bit more about the argument. So that's what I would do if I were you. You can approach it any way you want. If you're ready for the hard stuff, just jump in on the second one. Again, practice is very important because this is muscle memory in your brain to look for this stuff. And it's not, we just don't tend to do a good job as people of going through logic carefully and understanding whether something being said to us is valid or invalid, weak or strong, sound or unsound. All right. So there's something in logic called extending arguments, and there's a couple of different ways to extend arguments. There are vertical patterns that extend arguments, and there are horizontal patterns that extend arguments. You'll see that here, right? So this is a vertical pattern where verticals build up or deepen the reasoning. If this, therefore this, therefore this, therefore this. You're going deeper down into whatever you're reasoning with, right? So all this is a chain, and with each as you descend through this reasoning, you're actually going deeper and deeper into whatever topic you're talking about. This horizontal extension is broadening support for one conclusion, whereas this is leading to multiple conclusions. This is broadening is the word I want, broadening one conclusion. So horizontal, vertical. So this is an example of horizontal and vertical extensions. Here's the original argument. All humans are mortal. Socrates is a human. Socrates is mortal. If you want to extend that argument, you would say all mortals die. Socrates is dead. That's a good extension. We're going down into this idea of mortality. So this is vertical. Right? So all students must submit their assignment to pass the course. John has submitted his assignments. John will pass the course. If John passes the course, he will graduate this semester. John will graduate this semester. We're going further down vertically into this argument. We go from all students down to John specifically. Original argument is smoking causes lung cancer. Smoking is harmful to health. Smoking increases the risk of heart disease. Smoking leads to respiratory problems. Smoking is harmful to health. This is horizontal because you're adding premises to this conclusion that smoking is harmful to health. Cutting down rainforests destroys wildlife. Cutting down rainforests is harmful to the environment. Okay, this is horizontal as well. You get the idea. So here we're drilling down. You've got all students all the way down to John. You've got all humans specifically down to Socrates. So you see how we're going from the general to the particular. Over here, we've got a conclusion in each case. Smoking is harmful to health, and we're piling on additional reasoning. Right. This is when you make your closing argument to the jury, you're going to give them again, you're going to remind them again of every piece of evidence, if you're the prosecutor, of every piece of evidence you have that makes an argument for this person being guilty. All right. Co-joined, and so there's one thing to look at with extended arguments. So co-joined premises are when premises can only support a conclusion together. So in other words, if one of the premises are missing, the conclusion can't really be correct. So take the smoking one. I mean, that one does not have conjoint premises, right? You could pick two of those, and you'd still be making a good argument that smoking is unhealthy. Same with the rainforest example. So we'll see some examples of conjoint premises to come. Multiple conclusions is when a premises supports more than one conclusion in a passage. So although no single argument can have more than one conclusion, we evaluate passages as consisting of two or more arguments, but we join the conclusions with a bracket. So here's a look at that. So in this case, you see that these are conjoined. If you remove that, then this doesn't work. You have to have both of these to come to this conclusion. You make this premise, and you can actually extend it to two different conclusions. It's two arguments, right? It's not one argument with two conclusions. It can't be. There's two arguments here. Logic doesn't entertain, the idea that there are two arguments here. It is one argument in each case. So this is multiple conclusions from one argument. This is one conclusion that needs both premises in order to be correct. So these are some examples of conjoint, and I can't say that word, right? You can read through these on your own, and there's some questions there for you to think about. Then you'll see some multiple conclusion examples that will... Okay, so a little rough edit here because we had a little kerfuffle. Just, nothing big. The recycling truck was coming by and our recycling wasn't out, so we're just going to hold until next week. So I had to jump off real quick. But let me finish this, because on these next few pages are ways that arguments get extended that are invalid. And invalid, in this case, are being used to misinform people. And this goes on a lot in politics. It goes on a lot in communications between government and citizens, period. And so it's just interesting to look at these. I mean, countries with lower tax rates often experience increased foreign investment. Foreign investment contributes to economic growth. Therefore, lowering tax rates leads to economic growth. Absolutely untrue. Right? This argument is invalid because it assumes foreign investment drives economic growth. It ignores other variables. The premise is false. So there are several of these here, and I put them in just to kind of give you an idea of how extending arguments can be turned against us, right, and misinform us because they rush us to connect things that aren't connected. Animals experience pain and suffering in factory farming. Inflicting unnecessary pain and suffering is morally wrong. Therefore, consuming any animal products is unethical. Well, the premises support the idea that factory farming is unethical. The argument is invalid because it assumes all animal product is linked with factory farming. See how subtle that is? I mean, you would probably buy that argument, or some people would, right? I would, if I don't look closely at it. Because I don't like the idea of animals experiencing pain and suffering. But not all animal products come from this type of environment that we're looking at right here. So the extension, the argument is wrong. Yep. Here we go. Come on. Same thing here. I mean, we all probably don't like plastic in the ocean, but reducing if urban areas ban single-use plastics, experience a reduction in plastic waste, if therefore banning it will be a solution to all the plastic that's clogging up the ocean. Well, the premise supports that such bans reduce local plastic waste. The conclusion is an overreach because solving global plastic pollution crisis involves more than single-use plastics. It's not just those things. Yeah, they're a big problem. They're a big part of it, no doubt. But they're not the only thing. But it'd be easy to get sucked into that. You go, oh yeah, sure. But you got to investigate it. You got to think about all the potential applicabilities. And that is why looking at parts of arguments are important. That's why looking at how the parts of arguments relate to each other to make them valid or not, to make them sound or not, to make them weak or strong. So that's why we go through this particular exercise. Same thing here, right? So stricter border policies seek a reduction in illegal immigration. Therefore, stricter border control policies will eliminate all forms of illegal immigration. Okay. And then an extension here, stricter border controls will reduce crime rates nationwide. So we've made two arguments here. And it does not follow this last one from this premise, because this premise is only about the first one. So and this is an active argument in our society today, and it's absolutely based on fallacious information, because we actually can't make this argument, because immigrants to our country, according to records, are less likely to commit crime than others, which makes sense when you think about it, particularly if you're here illegally. The last thing you want is to have a run-in with the police, right? I mean, who would do that? It's fallacious, the argument, but it tends to make sense. Look at how many people assume this is a valid argument, but it's not. So these are just some examples of how you might use these types of tools to try and propagate misinformation, and it also gives you an idea of what maybe to look out for as you're hearing the narratives that come through the news and advertising and everywhere else. So anyway, that's it for this week. Hope that all makes sense to you. If you have any problems, have any questions, reach out to me. Email on Canvas, campus email, call me, flag me down, send up a flare, whatever works. Happy Saturday. Have a good weekend.